So we only have one officer today. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Anna Phipps, Planning Officer.
Thank you, Anna. As well as Michelle Bennett.
Hello.
And Samantha Hopkins, the officers here helping me to my right from the Democratic Services team, who are supporting the meeting. And we also have the council solicitor who is on the line somewhere. Hello, Gemma.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. And to my left is my vice chair for today, Councillor Chadwick. Who am I missing? Scattered through the chamber, of course, are the other committee members who are seated at a distance from each other in order to comply with social distancing requirements. We also have with us remotely members of the public and councillors Edison and Gatesby, who are speaking on applications that are to be considered today. So arrangements for dealing with planning applications, officers' summary and update will be given. Items involving attendance by the public will be dealt with first, and speakers are restricted to 3 minutes with a warning when 30 seconds remain. Members are to note the information given by officers and speakers. Any decision proposed which is contrary to the recommendation contained in the report will require reasons if the proposal is to refuse, and reasons and conditions if the proposal is to approve the application. In accordance with the Council's equality purpose policy, speakers are asked to refrain from making any comments which could be construed as being discriminatory or defamatory, otherwise it will be necessary to intervene. Please ensure mobile phones are switched on to silent to avoid any disruption to the meeting. And also, whilst you are not speaking, can you put yourselves on mute if you've not already done so? And fire procedure for those in the chamber: if the fire alarm sounds, you will be directed where to go, and please follow the instructions given by the officers. So agenda item number 1, pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Councillor Scow.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I did make a site visit, but didn't talk to anybody or make any comments to anybody, Chair, on this.
So can I just clarify what application is that?
Sorry, on the number 4.
Thank you.
And Cllr Jefferson.
Site. I spoke to no one, therefore I've not expressed my views in any way whatsoever.
Thank you, Cllr Jefferson. Cllr Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I received an email from Suzanne Smith from the Newbold Parish Council on item number 5, and also from our board colleague Jane Edison on item number 4 regarding this.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Just exactly the same as Cllr Lee.
Thank you. Councillor Winter.
Yeah, I visited the illicit site on 2 occasions. That's item 4, and I received a letter, an email on about number 5 at North Newbold. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greenwood.
On item 5,
Councillor Greenwood, could you put the microphone down towards you a little bit?
on item 5, I visited Newbold for the second time on Saturday and saw a few people, but spoke to no one. Expressed any views at all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Chadwick.
Thank you, Chairman. I visited the application number 4. I've also had correspondence on number 4. I've had correspondence on item 5.
And I also visited item number 4, the illicit application. I didn't see anyone on site or speak to anyone. And I've had a former site visit to the North Newbold site, but again, didn't speak to any resident. So, Councillor Jefferson. Oh, can you put your microphone on, Councillor?
Sorry, it's on that. I omitted to say I did have correspondence on item 4. I have had that on email as well, and I didn't say it, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Did I put correspondence in 9 for item 4? Thank you.
Chairman, sorry, but I also visited item 5 on Saturday morning for a second visit and saw a few people, but spoke to no one. Thank you.
I think that's complete. Good. So Item 2, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the subcommittee meeting held on the 7th of June. Moved by Cllr Lee, and seconded by Cllr Chadwick. Next one, any withdrawals?
No withdrawals, Chair.
Thank you. So we're taking, because of the speakers, we're taking item number 6 as the next one. Is that correct? No. No. Page 6, item 4, apologies. So this is change of use of land to a caravan and camping site comprising touring pitches, tent pitches and camping pods, Main Street, land north of Mount Farm, Main Street, Lisset. Do we have any updates on this?
Yeah, just a short update and introduction. So yes, the application is for the change of use of land to a caravan and camping site, and that would comprise 8 touring caravan pitches, 8 tent pitches, 6 camping pods, and the erection of an amenities building and associated works, including a vehicular access. The application is in the parish of Lisset, which doesn't have a development limit. The village doesn't have a development limit, but it's located close to the existing built development that there is in the village. The application is recommended for approval. And just a short update to condition 2, just to add an additional sentence, which should say the pitches shall not at any time be used for the siting of static caravans. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 3 speakers on this application. The first is Mrs. Stallard. Mrs. Stallard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
And we can hear you clear. So, Mrs. Stallard, you have 3 minutes and you'll be given a reminder at 30 seconds and you can start when you're ready.
Dear councillors, I'm speaking on behalf of the affected residents of Lisset. The main reasons why these residents and myself would request that this planning application is refused are that this is a sparsely populated hamlet which has been specifically chosen by its residents because there are no amenities or street lights and there is little or no noise at night. They view Lisset as a tranquil rural idyll and wish to preserve this rare and specialist characteristic. There has been over 65 objection letters and no letters of support. The introduction of a camping site of 22 pitches extremely close to residents' houses is not in keeping with the size and nature of the hamlet. Over 50% of the residents are retired. This is not compatible with a large number of holidaymakers, which could number up to 88, who tend to retire later and socialise outdoors. Tents and caravans have little or no sound and insulation. This application would overwhelm the hamlet of only 46 residents. There are no proposals in the application to ensure security or how antisocial behaviour amongst such a large number of visitors would be managed or mitigated. This large campsite is not appropriate in its location, taking into account the likely effects of noise pollution on the health and living conditions and the natural environment as stated in paragraph 180 of the National Planning Policy Framework and associated East Riding Council policies and its local plan. The local plan states that in the countryside, proposals for tourism development will be supported where their scale and cumulative impact is appropriate to the location. All of these policies are clear that context is everything when assessing the appropriateness of a development. The site will be clearly visible from the A165 and will not be sensitively integrated into the existing landscape. The recent announcement that the Yorkshire Wolds is to be a proposed area of natural outstanding beauty adds further consideration should be made to this application.
30 seconds remaining.
Given that there are no amenities in Lisset and an infrequent bus service, visitors would have to drive to access shops, pubs and attractions. There is a limited footpath in Lisset, but there are no further paths or public rights of way on which to walk or cycle safely. The fields that surround Lisset are actively farmed or full of livestock and is private property. It is clear that this proposed campsite would be dependent on regular car usage. This is therefore not a sustainable development, so this application does not meet the aims of the Council's climate change policy and climate emergency declaration.
Thank you. That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stodd. Next, we have Mr. Goodwin, who is the applicant. Mr. Goodwin, can we hear you?
Yes, hello.
Oh, I can hear you now. So, Mr. Goodwin, again, you'll have 3 minutes and you'll be given a reminder at 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Peter and my family and I have lived at Mount Farm for over 7 years. Having a young family and enjoying camping ourselves, we were aware of how little provision there was locally for camping and caravanning, away from the large caravan static sites. We decided that it would be great to open a new campsite that allowed people to enjoy the rural side of the East Riding, where people could come and just enjoy and relax. We commissioned an architect to design a layout and this was submitted. Feedback from local residents was that the scheme was overdeveloped and did not fit with the pared back site that we ourselves envisaged. Following the public comments, we changed our architect to a landscape designer and systematically went through the plan, taking into account all of the comments received from residents. We were keen that the campsite would have a low impact on both the environment and our neighbours, which is why we have moved the field entrance that would have an approval for away from our neighbour's entrance. We have proposed a native hedge to be planted to separate the site from the closest houses to further reduce any noise and visual impact. We have removed the hot tubs and we have removed the lighting scheme. We have changed the internal access road from tarmac to permeable limestone, allowing grass to grow through and give a grassed finish. We have reorientated the amenities block and redesigned it to give the appearance of a field shelter or stable block. We have proposed new orchard planting in the existing horse paddock that sits between the proposed camping field and the neighbouring houses. This will further reduce any noise from the campsite, with trees providing a natural acoustic barrier. We are providing 2 new passing places on the road described by residents as being problematic for the passing of vehicles and so providing a solution to an existing problem. Landscaping at the site will be conditioned to allow protection for local residents who have concerns about the visual impact and noise. National and local planning policy is not only supportive of this proposed campsite, but actively encourages the provision of a range of tourism accommodation and specifically rural accommodation. East Riding's local plan notes tourism as a key employment sector, and the policy seeks to encourage appropriately located small-scale service and self-catering tourist accommodation across the
2 seconds remaining.
sub-area. We note that there are no objections from statutory consultees, and we would like to thank the case officer for their recommendation for approval. We acknowledge the concerns of local residents, and we would hope that members are able to support our application now that all material considerations have been addressed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. And we have Councillor Evison to speak next. Councillor Evison, are you there?
I am, yes, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Evison, again, you've got 3 minutes and you'll be given a 30-second reminder.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the committee to consider refusal of this application. I appreciate that planning officers following guidelines have arrived at their recommendation. But as councillors who also represent residents, I hope you will find planning reasons to be able to offer residents of Lisset some protection. All the concerns already highlighted by residents are very relevant and sound planning reasons for approval. So those being, Lisset is a small hamlet of approximately 27 properties. It would be totally overwhelmed by 22 pitches. The application is for touring caravans, camping by nature. This business will be for visitors who have no connection with the community, just arriving for short breaks. There are no facilities on site or in the village. and this will most certainly lead to potential noise nuisance, antisocial behaviour, and a great deal of vehicle movement on and off. For those who have been to the site or seen the site, you will appreciate how open it is. Clearly visible from the A165 Bridlington Road, from roads within Lisset and from a number of residential properties. It will not be attractive or desirable. There are many other sites available in the area, all with plenty of spaces available for touring caravans and camping. This application will disrupt and spoil village life and be an unattractive introduction into open countryside. We are a tourist area, but that must not be allowed to happen at all costs. And our countryside and residents' quality of life are an important consideration. As I say, this campsite, by virtue of the number of people it will bring in, will multiply the number there compared to the inhabitants. They do feel overwhelmed. They feel very worried about this, that the life they had moved here to have is actually going to be spoilt. So I would like you to ask on their behalf to consider refusal to protect their quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Have anyone wishing to speak on this? Cllr Lee.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all the contributors today. I can see this is a, excuse me, it's a very important decision for us to take today, and one that we have to take very carefully. My view on this, on the face of it, when I first read it, was to be reasonably favourable, if I'm honest. It looked, I can see that the applicant had worked hard, I think, to ensure that any issues locally were mitigated, and I can see that he has done that and he's confirmed that in his presentation. Having said that, I can see that the issue here is sort of proportionality with the local population. With 27 local residents, this in effect is doubling the size of that local population. And I can see that you know, individuals who've moved to Lisset and probably been there for quite a long time would feel, frankly, really aggrieved by the fact that they clearly their day-to-day life is going to be totally changed. I'm in a bit of a quandary. I think most members probably would feel the same, whereby we want to do the right thing for residents. We also want to ensure that, you know, council and planning policies are maintained here. So I've got a question before I sort of confirm or want to make up my mind, and it's really one whereby the main, in my view at least, the main objection to this is the proportionality of these developments in relation to the existing residents. I think if this was at an edge of a village that maybe had a couple of hundred inhabitants, I don't think the argument would be there, frankly. It would be, you know, reasonably proportionate to the local area. It's just, for me, this is really quite devastating for the individual residents there, purely because they've had a very tranquil life, and that's what they moved there for, and I can understand that. And I think Cllr Jefferson has made that very clear and described that very effectively. So my question is, what substantial planning reasons could we give as a committee if we were to agree with that? Does the argument that this is out of proportion to the inhabitants or out of proportion to the locality, does that hold water in planning terms? So I wanted to ask the officer in question whether it's, I'm not sure if it's Anna or whether to ask that, or indeed Gemma Percy, whether or not this was hold water, because I am a bit of a quandary. My emotion is saying, no, I think this is totally over the top for the local residents. I can see that there's a strong argument in favour of rejecting this. But what I don't want to do is just use that as a reason just to refuse this. So my question is, what planning argument is there against this in balance, and does the proportional issue that I've raised hold water in a planning sense?
Anna, is that one for you or for Gemma?
Can answer that, and then if Gemma's got anything to add, then we can go with that. Yeah, clearly the policy does have that check and balance in terms of scale and the impact of the scale on the surrounding area. The scale has to be appropriate. We have to tie that to harm. So what we would then need is, what would the material planning harm be as a result of that scale? So is it potentially that members, or you may feel, Cllr Lee, that there's harm to the amenity as a result of the scale from the noise and disturbance from the development, but also is there harm to the character and appearance of the village as a result of the scale of it, because it is such a small hamlet? So I would exercise caution with just saying the scale's not proportionate with the size of the village, and actually that go one step further and identify what that harm is in terms of either residential amenity or landscape character and the character and appearance of the village. So it's kind of just taking that step further in terms of identifying what the harm is. And I think that would be a planning reason, definitely.
Gemma, you have something to add?
Nothing else to add there, really, Chair. That's more than sufficiently answered, I believe, Cllr Lee's query. You just need to go a little bit a step further, as Anna has suggested.
Thank you, John.
Am I able to come back briefly on that?
Yes.
Yeah, well, if I'm honest, it does answer the question, but it doesn't fully do that, because I think that, you know, if this, as I said earlier on, was a relatively big village, even if it had 50 inhabitants or 100 or 75, adding another 24 in proportion wouldn't be so catastrophic. I can see that the biggest argument here, and why, frankly, it would change the look of Licit completely, is that you are in effect with this one relatively small development, clearly 24 pitches overall, I think it is, you know, frankly, is by the here and there, really, in the whole order of things. But it is doubling, as the objector indicated, Mrs. Stallard. Clearly, you know, there could be up to 60 or 80, I think she said, people at any given time. Well, so arguably, you could actually have 4 times the amount of people in the development than there's actually residing in the area. That, for me, is disproportionate, I think. And that's I think most of, well, from what I can understand, the argument against this. I'm going to sit on the fence for the moment to see what other members feel, but that for me is the biggest issue here.
Councillor Winter, did you have your hand up? Okay. Councillor Stow.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, difficult one, this. I'm not sure which way to go on this one. Because of COVID-19, these campsites are popping up all over the place because people are staying in this country rather than being able to go abroad. So people are jumping on the bandwagon and creating campsites. There's quite a few on my ward, but I listen to what the ward councillor says, and I agree with what she says. You know, staycation, but in the right place. Is this campsite in the right place? There are no pubs in the village, shops to boost the existing businesses. There's nothing for the villagers. There's no benefit to the village whatsoever. No employment for anybody. So I'm balanced. I'll wait for other comments, but at the moment, I think it's in the wrong place, this campsite. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Chadwick.
Thank you, Chairman. I note in the report that it agrees with S4, EC2 and A2. I would beg to differ. I was prompted to look at the policies, and I came up with the facts that it is in the open countryside. There's no benefit to Licit whatsoever. So policy S4, which subparagraph C11, the intrinsic character of the settlement, I don't think it has anything to add to the settlement whatsoever. Policy S4A1, the scale in this location is not appropriate and does not support the vibrancy of Licit. Policy EC2, subparagraph A, helping to meet existing deficiencies. Whilst I know that caravan sites are busy, I just feel that an odd caravan here and there could be fitted in at Gransmore, Barmston, Oldham, Skipsea, the local sites. Bridlington, I understand, is a big site and can be very busy. But some of the smaller sites, I'm sure they will be able to fit in. Policy EC2B, it notably mentions conversion of existing buildings. There are no buildings involved in this, so EC2B is not appropriate. The highways, there are no footpaths and lighting, whilst I know the report does say somewhere that they plan to put footpaths and lighting and laybys. We had a lay-by put in our village for that very purpose, because we have a narrow lane and it's used by people eating their lunch and things. So that road being a busy road, I'm sure that lorries that go down there will be probably parking in there to have the lunch. The landscaping, certainly I think it's insufficient as it's shown on the plan, because you're showing 7 trees. We don't know how big these trees will be, but 7 trees to shelter the half a dozen houses, I don't think that will block the vision of that site. The bus route, yes, it's irregular, as I think the lady said, a regular bus stop, but I've never actually travelled up that road very regularly, and I don't think I've ever seen in 30 odd years, I don't think I've ever seen a bus go into Lisset. Maybe it does once an hour or once a day, maybe, I don't know, but I think it's irregular. So campers will be using their cars to go wherever they've got to go, wherever they want to go. And that's hardly within our green credentials that we talk about the council taking on. Certainly the site would detract from the village, even though hedges are planted. It can be seen. I came past there this morning and you can see the site from the junction of Allison Lane and Fisher Lane, where the accident black spot, as they call it. You can see the site completely from there, so it's not going to be sheltered by hedges. So I think it's detrimental to the local residents, disturbance. Again, as I think it was Councillor Everson maybe said, this quiet settlement imposing on their quality of life late at night with noise and stuff. Policy NV1, quality of design, that's subjective, having regard to the amenity of existing properties. I don't consider pods and camping tents quality design, so I think ENV1 B4. ENV2 A2, high quality landscape, protect and enhance open spaces within settlements which contribute to their character. Again, how much hedging you put in and how high it is, that's subjective. Policy A2 B7, sensitively make the best use of the area's natural assets. Again, putting camping site in that position, I don't think that is sensitive to residents of Lisset. And policy A2C4, retaining the distinctive character and landscape settings of the walled villages. Again, I don't think that's retaining the character of Lisset. So for those reasons, I'll move refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Winter.
Yeah, I would second Councillor Chadwick's proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Winter. Any more speakers?
Yes, I would just like to add to Councillor Chadwick that it's what follows this. One could see that this could be and developed into a very much larger site with coffee shops and bars and other things eventually. So I would go with refusal on this one.
No one else wishes to speak. So we have a... Oh, I'm sorry, Gemma. I can't see you waving.
Apologies. Sorry, I was just going to remind councillors, as probably you would expect, that we are dealing with the application before us rather than any future application. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Right, we have.
So we have a proposal, but before we go to that, I just wanted to just check with the planning officer that you're satisfied with the reasons that have been given for refusal.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to clarify about policy EC2 is that the criteria doesn't state it has to be a conversion of an existing building. There's a number of criteria and it can be one of those. And one of those is new caravan site. So there is a check in that policy. So I just wanted to clarify that. So I wouldn't feel comfortable with that being included in the refusal reason, but we could say, obviously there is the element about the scale being appropriate for the location. But certainly I think what I'm sort of hearing is that it's the scale in comparison to the scale of the village would be harmful to the intrinsic rural intrinsic character of the village and the character of the area. And obviously Councillor Chadwick mentioned EMV1 and EMV2 and A2 in that respect, and also the amenity of residents as a result of the scale. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. And I think I have another speaker, Cllr Jefferson.
Yes, please. I really am in quite a quandary with this one, because having read it at home, the full agenda, and gone through it and through it and through it, I was trying to find out if it differed anywhere from the most recent ones we've had at Mappleton and at Bewholme, where in fact there is 3 times as many people going on the caravan site at Bewholme to what there is in the village. And I wondered how we would make that stack up as a reason to refuse. I have to say that I'm very surprised that the councillors who have everyone have spoke with so much passion and opposition and disproportionality and material harm. I would like an answer really from the planning officer to perhaps, if she could clear for me so that I know which way I'm going to go, because quite clearly I was looking for refusals on the past ones, which are only months ago, not years ago, and got no support whatsoever in the fact that there was far more people going to be coming each day, perhaps on holiday or for a week or a month, than there was in the village. That never came into the equation, funnily enough, when I said it, it was poo-pooed. So I'm thinking today, it all feels very, very different. And it feels, I am quite worried in myself about this, because I've got written down entirely in the open countryside. I've got quality of life of the residents will be diminished. I was so for it, but I've heard so much in here, to say about where this is really not going to be allowed. Then I have to say, it's made me feel quite different. It makes me feel, how is this different from Mappleton and Bewholme, which, yes, is my area, and I lost on those both occasions. And I thinking to myself, what's gone on here? I can see what we're saying. I visited the site, and I personally would not like to see this be there. But today it's been really quite uncomfortable for me. Quite uncomfortable. Can the officer tell me what is the difference then, you think, with Bewholme, such a tiny village, and the amount of, caravans and tents and things that we're putting out there, and also with Mappleton, the people of Mappleton who no way wanted all those things. We're even putting footpaths and everything in. What you're saying here is there's no point putting footpaths and everything in. And it's just such a turnaround in such a short, I know we're looking at this agenda today.
I was going to say, today we're looking at this.
But surely as councillors, we've all got consciences, haven't we?
What we do, yes.
I mean, all I can say is that obviously officers have recommended approval for this, and obviously did recommend approval on the other application. So we're comfortable as officers that it does meet the planning policies and is acceptable. Obviously, every application is considered in its own merits, but I'm obviously just guided by the members and the discussion that's happening. But the recommendation is the same, so as on the previous one at View Home.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay,
Oh, sorry, Tim, I forgot you with the conversation.
Thank you, Chair. I think like Cllr Jefferson, I'm kind of stuck in a quandary here because I can see that the developer has taken a lot of discussions on board. They've changed items such as the amenities block into something which will be almost hidden. They've put lots of landscaping in. There's quite a distance between the caravans and the nearest properties. They're even putting some passing places into the road to help with traffic. Personally, I can see that there are issues also in terms of the detrimental impact on the amenity of the village and the character of the village, because there will be a lot more people coming in. But in my opinion, on balance, this application actually has merit for the village. It has merit for the area, and of course it brings in, yes, okay, it brings in some tourism people which will be mostly looking outside of the village for their provisions and their entertainments, and then we'll get back to the caravans, and yes, they'll be driving through the village late at night with their headlamps on, but there's always the quarry traffic which is going to be going through the village during daylight hours as well, which I would have thought would have been actually a worse impact on the village than caravans and people coming in to go to their camping pods. So I would actually like to move officer's recommendations on this one for approval. So yeah, and we'll see where we go.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. You mentioned village several times. I have to say, I think this is more of a settlement than a village. It really is just a string of a few houses with no facilities for any campers nearby. Yeah. Well, it's a fact, apparently. Councillor Lee.
Just a quick question. I'm sorry if I didn't pick this up clearly in the papers. What is the distance between the pods and the caravan to the nearest residential home? Just so I can get my head around. Can we have a specific meterage or distance? Because I think part of this is, as I said, for me it's this proportionality issue, but also it's actually whether or not it does have a detrimental effect. I mean, if it's far enough away to make any noise pretty insignificant, then that does have a bearing on the discussion, I think. So I just want to see whether or not if the officers feel that there's inevitably going to be a change of culture here. So holidaymakers are going to be later on. I mean, if you're retired, as I think Councillor Everson was saying, most of the I think inhabitants are probably retired in that there. So there will be a difference of people's lifestyles. But providing it's in proportion again, and it's not too far away, or sorry, it's far enough away, then that would make my view a little bit different, perhaps. So can I just check on the exact distance between these units and the nearest resident?
Now I've got Gemma waving a hand as well. So do I come to Anna first or Gemma? Anna first.
Yeah, paragraph 7.22 contains the distance. So there's a minimum separation of 30 metres from the boundaries of the nearest residential properties. So the paddock provides a minimum separation distance of 30 metres across that paddock. 30 metres.
30 metres.
Thank you.
Right, Gemma. No, she doesn't.
Can I just say, did you say 30 or 13?
Sorry, 30.
30, yeah.
30. I also just wanted to mention just about the age and personal circumstances of the residents. Obviously, it's just to flag that's, I'm not sure if Gemma was going to say something similar, but obviously that's a transient point because anybody could come and move into the village and leave. So I obviously just wanted to flag that. Obviously, I take your point that they are retired, but that's not necessarily a material planning consideration because that is a transient thing. Anybody could move into the village.
I have to say my concerns when I visited the site weren't just the size, it was the lack of facilities, the narrow roads, you know, if they were coming from, say, the hill direction to go towards the site, they're more likely to turn first left, which takes them through the narrow roads of the village rather than going down the designated road with a caravan behind. I know highways are saying there isn't a problem, but that appeared to me to be a bit of a problem. And especially when I was standing on Fisher Road and the HGVs came past and I had to jump aside very quickly. They were not driving slowly. So I do have a number of concerns over this in addition to what has been mentioned. So,
okay. So it's been proposed by Councillor Chadwick and seconded by Councillor Winter to refuse this application, overturning the officer's recommendation for approval for the following reason in relation to scale of this proposal in comparison to scale of the number of the number of residents living in this settlement, and in relation to the detrimental harm to the amenity of residents and quality of life. All those in favour of this proposal, of this motion to refuse, please raise your hand. 1. All those against? So we have 5 in support of the motion to refuse and 4 against. So that's carried. The application's refused.
So does that application now have to go through fall to strategic? No. Okay, that application is refused. Okay, can we turn to the next item on the agenda, which is item 5 on page 30. Do we have any update?
Oh, sorry, Chair, I was just thinking about that.
Okay.
This application is for the erection of 5 dwellings and associated works following the demolition of existing structures at Hall Farm, Eastgate, North Newbold. The application was brought to the Eastern Subcommittee on the 7th of June and was deferred because members had concerns about the proposed roof materials, which were on plots 1, 2 and 3 were proposed to be zinc. The amended plan, the applicant has now submitted amended plans to address this concern and have now removed all zinc roof cladding from any of the dwellings, and plots 1, 2 and 3 would now have slate roof tiles, and therefore it's brought back to the committee following that amendment, and that concern has now been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We have 3 speakers on this item. The first is Ms. O'Sullivan, who is objecting to the application. Ms. O'Sullivan, can you hear me?
I can, hello.
Oh, we can hear you now, Ms. O'Sullivan. So you have 3 minutes and you'll be giving a reminder at 30 seconds.
Thank you. Many material planning considerations speak against this development and our concerns are extensive. The current focus on the tin roofs is irrelevant in the wider scheme of issues. The application conflicts with many development plan policies and principles, including the East Riding local plan. It is outside the development limit. It includes a greenfield undeveloped site in a conservation area, and Newbold is a non-market village classed as unsustainable for new housing development. Previous planning applications for this site have not been supported on these grounds by planning officers. So why now should the local plan be ignored for large properties which do not meet the affordable housing needs of the residents? The inclusion of a contribution to affordable housing will not be of any benefit here. What is the point of East Riding Council spending large amounts of time, money and research creating a local plan if the associated development plan is just going to be set aside when a controversial application is submitted? The site is not included as an area that should be developed, a decision that your very own officers have made after extensive research and consideration. This development should not be passed using the excuse of removal of unsightly agricultural buildings. It is simply not a valid reason, and the two are not interdependent. We have lived with these for many years and can continue to do so in preference to having this development imposed on us. The profit of the developers should not be at the residents' expense. The local news recently informed us of the World Way, which is including Newbold to be protected by an application to Natural England, making this as a place of outstanding natural beauty. The advantage of this means that the local authority have a duty to follow the government policy to build back a greener strategy and enhance tourism in the area. This means that there should be a commitment from our very own council to offer us a high level of protection in maintaining and developing areas like this within a conservation area. The development would see the removal of many mature trees with TPOs on them and the destruction of wildlife habitats. There is also a high likelihood of archaeological remains on this site. The wall adjacent to the entrance is part of a conservation order, and we must protect these. This is at a time when protecting the planet is a key government and local policy. Eastgate is a worst possible place to add to an inadequate sewage system. Access to the site is on a blind corner with traffic merging from 3 directions. It is already a significant safety issue, and snapshots of visits from your officers will not encompass the dangers in that area. Because there are no recorded accidents doesn't mean that it's
30
safe.
seconds remaining.
Further traffic would only exacerbate this. Most comments in support of the application were from friends of the employees and the landowner and do not reflect the true support for the site. Most residents agree that this development is wholly unsuitable, and we fear that it is just the start, as this is phase 1. The application contradicts all refusal comments from council officers previously raised as objections, but these are not included in your committee report. The East Riding local plan has been adopted by you as officers and identifies this site to be in an unsustainable location outside the development limit in a conservation area and potentially now under the government's Build Back a Greener strategy.
Thank you. That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. Sorry. Then I have Miss Ridley, who is the agent for the applicant. Miss Ridley, can you hear me?
I can. It's Chris Calvert rather than Miss Ridley, Chair. Apologies.
Oh, okay. And again, you have 3 minutes to be given a reminder at 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. As with the last committee meeting, your officer's report has more than adequately addressed the key issues arising from this scheme, and the recommendation of approval reflects the proactive discussions with your officers over the past few months. Following the last committee, the concerns of members with regards to the roofing materials were noted and the scheme updated accordingly. The proposed zinc roofing has now been removed from the scheme, and all plots will feature slate roofs with the exception of the building to be tiles. The proposals will sit comfortably within this setting, leading to a marked improvement over the current and long-standing derelict condition of the site. The proposals will result in the loss of modern agricultural type buildings that sit prominently in the street scene, deferring that footprint across the site and replacing older structures that are at the near point of collapse. A characterful building at the front of the site will be retained and shall provide a focal point for the overall scheme at its gateway location. The site itself has been in a variety of uses, including the keeping of livestock, farm contracting and metal fabrication. Clearly, these uses will cease, positively impacting on the residential amenity of the area. I do accept it's unusual to find a scheme increasing in the number of units, notably when outside of development limits. However, following your officer's advice, the scheme is an improvement from the original submission and offers a wide range of benefits to the scheme, beyond just the improvement of the visual quality of the area, when the present condition clearly only offers a negative impact upon the special quality of the conservation area, listed buildings and residential amenity. As your officers set out, the increase in the number of units allows for a greater housing mix, bringing about contributions to affordable housing and public open space. Indeed, we've submitted a unilateral undertaking in draft form for your officers to demonstrate that commitment. We note the objections from the Parish Council, notably on drainage matters, which have been satisfactorily addressed by the applicant's submission, with no objections being raised by the relevant key consultees. This includes ecology, highway and archaeology matters in addition. From the applicant's perspective, and you as a decision-making entity, the responses from those consultees carried significant weight in your decision-making process today. Overall, I commend the approach taken by your officers and members of the last committee to proactively engage in the opportunity that this redevelopment presents and to clearly set out the planning balance in their report as to why you should follow your officer's recommendation to approve the scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We also have Councillor Gateshill to speak. Councillor Gateshill, are you there?
Just unmuting, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Again, Councillor Gateshill, you have 3 minutes. You'll be given a reminder at 30 seconds.
Yes, good afternoon, councillors. Yesterday afternoon, I spent watching the YouTube recording of the meeting of the 7th of June, and I'm aware of the concerns then expressed, which were not limited to tin roofs and the like. It's interesting to note that this application was extended from 3 properties to 5, and that's of importance when you consider the Conservation Officer's input. You may think that this increase turned his concerns into objections by reasons of the increased numbers. The starting point is the local plan. This development is outside the development limits. There is, in fact, a presumption against development. That's planning reason 1 to refuse. Policy S4, supporting development in villages and the countryside. There can be, and set out in S4, there are exceptional circumstances, but none are applicable here. The officer's report at 1.7 simply says this: the development would fail to meet any of the special circumstances listed in policy S4. That is planning reason 2 for refusing this application. Next, it is said in the report, and this follows on, objections do not tip the balance against a favourable recommendation. This, I suggest to you, is the wrong approach, using the wrong starting point, and that is the 3rd planning reason to refuse. Next, affordable housing. Policy H2 applies. There is to be no affordable housing within this development, only a commuted sum. That is the 4th planning objection. Next, housing mix. Policy H1 applies, creating a mix of housing. And there is a housing mix guidance note in June of 2020. This application simply drives a coach and horses through the principles therein set out. Newbold doesn't need any more large properties, it needs smaller properties, and there are to be none. Next, the conservation area. Well, the officer's observations are reported. Section 72 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990 says there must be special regard to the desirability of preserving and enhancing the conservation area. And the conservation officer simply does not support that principle. That is planning reason 6.
And that's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Gateshill, your time was up. Thank you. Well, asking questions yet. Maybe I could just ask the planning officer, how much of this is actually outside the development limits?
The site is completely outside the development limit.
It is, okay, thank you. Councillor Greenwood.
Yes, this is one of my wards, but I would like to hear comments from the rest of the councillors before I give my take on this. Thank you.
Don't think anyone's rushing forward to speak. Cllr Jefferson.
Yes, I simply wanted to say that to me, I'm disappointed again with this one because I really believe it should be refused. I have read it through very, very carefully. And to me, although we listened to it at the last meeting, I think we were all a little bit surprised at that meeting about what actually came out. And that's really why it's here. To me, it says it all. The councillor's already said most of what I'd written here, just a small piece to say, not in accordance with the East Riding Local Plan, conservation concerns and policy S4. I really believe that this should be refused. I don't understand why we're even considering the fact that it could be there. It's meant to be open area, you know, and what we're saying is that in fact we can't provide anywhere to play, therefore we are looking at financial interest to make it so it can fit in there. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think we really need this. And you know, and I'd be quite happy to move refuse, but I'm not sure that those few things are of enough importance that anyone else would be interested in wanting to refuse it. But that is my opinion today, I'm sorry. I think we said a lot of it at the last meeting.
Thank you, Cllr Jefferson.
Well, if anyone else is going to speak, I would like to say that it's my belief all villages like Newport should be protected, respected and valued for their contribution.
Sorry, can I just ask you to start that again? Your microphone is not on and it needs to be moved down. Thank you.
So do I start again? It's my belief that all villages like Newport should be protected and respected and valued for their contribution to preserving our green and pleasant lands. Now, whilst I can see a great deal of change has been and effort has taken place regards to the plan, I've listened to what one councillor has said. So I'm listening to all the grievances of the local residents who may be affected by this. I cannot in good conscience dismiss their concern. So on this occasion, I must choose to refuse until such a time the local residents are satisfied with this. And that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cllr Greenwood. Cllr Scow.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we sent this away from our last meeting, mainly about the roofing, I think, which has been addressed. But getting back to the development outside the development area, 1.3 is what I'm going to ask. It says here, although the site is outside the development limits for North Newbold and therefore represents a departure from the development plan in relation to a new residential development in the countryside, it is considered that there are material planning considerations which would justify a departure in this instance. What are those planning considerations from the officer, please?
So they're in summary set out in the next paragraph, which is 1.4. Essentially, the site is considered, although it is outside the development limit, it's considered to be in an accessible and sustainable location close to the village centre of North Newbold. And so that's one consideration. And then the existing development on site is considered to detract from the character and appearance of the area significantly, and the conservation area. And it's considered that the proposed development would represent a more effective use of the land for residential purposes and would be more consistent with the surrounding development than the existing use on site. So it would be more compatible and more appropriate in relation to the surrounding residential development than the current use of the site. So it's therefore considered that on that basis, they are material considerations that in this case outweigh the departure from the development land. So the sustainable location, the current harm to the character of the area that would be significantly improved, and the fact that the use of residential development would be more compatible with surrounding development than the existing agricultural use of the site.
But those considerations are debatable, aren't they?
Okay, thanks. Cllr Lee.
We had a small number of items on our agenda today, but they are very, very difficult ones, frankly. Certainly these first two have been. This is a difficult one. I completely sympathise and understand the concerns that residents of North Newbold have with this, and also particularly with my colleague, Cllr Greenwood. The thing that's probably making me more positive about this, I think, as the officer has just said, is that the rundown nature of the current facility that's in here is clearly needing to be addressed at some point. And as Councillor Scow has indicated, we had quite a big debate about this on the last meeting, and the key objection that the committee had was in fact regarding this roofing issue. And clearly the applicant has, worked with the officers, addressed those. So I'm minded to agree that we should be putting this as a proposed to with officers' recommendations, because I think these decisions and these debates take a course of action which is sometimes different on each day. And clearly, as Cllr Jefferson has indicated about the previous application, sometimes the way that the discussions run, it can actually make the decision to be slightly different. And I think on this occasion, we should be consistent with the discussion that we had last time. So I think, as I said, the main issue for me, and the main positive point about agreeing with officers' recommendation is that, as it says in here, as Anna's just mentioned, the existing rundown, derelict, unused appearance of the site detracts from the character and appearance of the area. For that reason, I think that I would like to move officers' recommendations for agreement.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. In my opinion, if the properties which are currently there are looking run down and derelict, then that is down to the owner of those properties to improve them. And if he doesn't improve them, then it is down to this council to ensure that we force him to do so. The properties which he is intending constructing are outside of the development limit, and that is how we should be viewing it today. And I think I would second, if nobody has already, the refusal of this application on the grounds that it is outside of the development limit.
I was going to come back to Cllr Jefferson for the reason for refusal. Was that the reason that you were giving?
It's not in accordance with our lease riding local plan, and for goodness sake, we like to do the local plan and we make a good job of it, and our officers take a lot of time on it. Surely we should be consistent, if at all possible. And the conservation officer does have concerns, which sometimes we listen to, and if it doesn't suit us, we don't. But on this occasion, I think we should listen to him. The access into that property, it's all right saying that by making it larger and just taking some wall down won't make much difference. Yes, it will. It'll make a big difference. Does it mean it's going to be any better? It doesn't say so. Now, everybody's opinion's different, and as obviously a previous councillor said that we should be consistent with our discussion of last month. Well, we could be, because the point is we didn't finish our discussion of the last month because we didn't come to the situation where we decided refuse or approve. We put it off to this month. Therefore, our discussion is what we are doing here, irrespective of we thought was right or wrong. This is not in accordance with the local plan. What are we doing? That's why I said I didn't understand why this was coming from our officers. That's how they see it. It's not how I see it. Therefore, I'm all confused. I'm sorry, it doesn't suit everybody, but I have to have a conscience, as I said at the last one.
Gemma, are you there, Gemma? Yes. Is this a good enough reason for refusal?
I think I'll need a little bit more, I'm afraid, from the councillors to be able to progress the reason. Obviously, this was brought before us previously. We've talked into in a lot of detail about the issues raised on a previous occasion, and obviously we're looking at them again today. They've amended the plans, and we've got a different roofing scheme. So what we need to look at is actually what the issues are, particularly with this development, and what the harm would be. If you can maybe go a little bit further, councillors, please.
Thank you, Gemma. Well, from my perspective, sorry, I'll come back to you, Pauline, in a moment.
Well, with concerns, because we have to we have to be concerned about the flooding and sewerage. I know sewerage is not into the planning scene at all, but there are serious concerns there, and it's time that something was done, and it's time that our MP, who is involved in this sort of scenario, we'd like to know what is going to happen when Yorkshire Water decide to do something about the sewerage. It is important, but it's also not just that. It's the conservation, which I've looked at again, and you know, we have to take into consideration that this is a lovely village. It's a green and pleasant village, and if the residents can't complain about it, then who can? And it's up to us as ward councillors to support them. So on this occasion, I think we do have grounds to refuse it. I'm not a legal person, but I'm sure there are good grounds, especially with the conservation officer refusing as well. Thank you very much. And I concur with Cllr Jefferson on everything she said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenwood. Well, as you know, I paid a site visit to this application as well, and my thoughts were that something needed to be done. It does look a bit of an eyesore at the moment. Some work has to be done to put it right. And we did consider this application at the last meeting, as has been said. And the only item that came up as being of concern was the finish of the roofs to make them more in keeping with the rest of the village. Your comments about foul water drainage, I do have concerns over that. Unfortunately, it's not a planning issue. I wish it were, maybe we could get it sorted. This is very much down to Yorkshire Water, and we've seen it on a number of applications previously where there's been already existing problems with foul water drainage, and whether they've been resolved following the additional approval of applications, who knows? I hope they're taking notes and that they do get something done about it. In the meantime, this site needs to have something done to it. The buildings that are on that site are more likely to fall down in the near future if nothing's done, from what I saw, including the wall around the site, which also is very historic. Without some repair work to that, that's likely to fall into disrepair. I felt that what the applicant was coming forward with looked suitable for the village, especially with the alteration to the roof coverings. From my perspective, looking at the site from various angles, I don't think the buildings would be that visible apart from the roofs. It's only from certain angles you would see into the site. Maybe the officer could correct me on that, but I think there's very limited vision.
Yeah, because it sets so far back beyond the wall that's there at the moment. It won't be highly visible from that views within the village.
And in terms of being outside development limits, are the houses taking up virtually the space or the location that the existing farm buildings are, if they're still standing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think my understanding is yes, that it will significantly, but will be on quite a significant amount of where it has been or previously built development of those farm buildings.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually of the mind to go with officer's recommendation on this one. Sorry, where do we stand at the moment?
So at the moment we have a proposal to refuse the application. That's the only one that we have.
Okay. I've got Cllr Lee.
I did actually move to reject. I know you've got to take the first one first, but sorry, to approve the application. But I don't believe it was seconded.
Wasn't seconded then.
Well, I can second that one. Thank you. Ready, Cllr Lee? So can we move to the, I don't think anyone else wishing to speak? No.
So before we take a vote on the motion to refuse the application, I just want to double check with the planners and with Gemma, who has a hand up.
Sorry, Gemma, we need a wave down here somehow.
Apologies. I'm afraid I do need a little bit more clarification from the members putting forward the refusal. I believe the flooding issues have actually been resolved, and obviously if they are wanting to refer to the conservation officer comments and being a reason for refusal, could you perhaps refer to the points that they see to agree with?
Sorry, Cllr Jefferson, can I please ask you to put your microphone on?
Okay, Cllr Jefferson.
What about policy S4? Where are we with that then, please, Gemma?
Gemma, did you catch that? No, really.
I didn't, I'm afraid. Was it S4? Did I sort of caught the...
Yeah, could we not use that?
Policy S4.
If you think it's appropriate, councillor. I mean, I'm happy for you to put forward whatever motion you think is appropriate, but I just need you to give substantive reasons. So if you want to go a little bit further and refer to why you want to use S4, that would be really helpful.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you see, to me, sitting here and not being the ward councillor, I have to say that to me, it's not in accordance with the East Riding local plan. It's outside of the development limits. And to me, that is two main reasons for an objection. I mean, that's what we are as planners, are we not? We're not meant to just have our own opinions. And I believe, obviously, that was it Councillor Gateskill who was speaking earlier? I think he made a lot of common sense. And I really agreed with what he was saying, because I didn't really want to speak on this. As I say, I'm not the ward member. But I just believe, having gone and looked, I think really, I don't see how it fits in. I don't know why we would be approving it.
I think Anna wants to come in as well, Gemma. Anna?
That's fine. I mean, so it's outside the development limit, so contrary to the local planning principle. And then you mentioned about the conservation officer and harm to the character of the conservation area. So it was just this.
Councillor Jefferson, you don't have your microphone on.
Sorry, I was thinking she was wanting to write it down. Terribly sorry. To me, the conservation officer saying he's not happy. Well, why would we be? Conservation is important to the East Riding. So can we not use conservation concerns?
Yeah, I just wanted to obviously Councillor Jefferson mentioned about officers' own opinion. I just wanted to flag that obviously the NPPF does say that planning decisions should be taken in accordance with the development plan unless there are other material considerations. So in this case, the reason why we have come to a conclusion that is contrary to the development plan insofar as it's outside the development limit is because there are other material considerations, and obviously the report has set that out. The report's also clear that the conservation officer has indicated some concern about the layout of the development, and the report acknowledges there is a difference in opinion between the conservation officer and the officer, but on the whole, it's found that the benefits that would be brought to the conservation area in terms of improving the appearance of the site, because of the current appearance of the site distracting from the conservation area. That's why we've found that there are wider public benefits that would outweigh any harm to the conservation area. And it really was just to mention, because that obviously it was deferred last time for a very specific reason, and to be fair to the applicant, they have gone away and listened to that reason and come back with an amended scheme to try and overcome that concern. And I just wanted to flag that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Did you have anything more to add, Gemma? Okay, thank you. Councillor Greenwood.
How can we be sure that there won't be more development after this on that site? How can we be sure?
That would be the subject of another planning application, councillor. Right, so you summarise.
Yep, sure. It's been proposed by Cllr Jefferson and seconded by Cllr Greenwood to refuse this application, overturning the officer recommendation for deferral and approval. And the reasons given were the reasons for refusal where it's outside the development limits, contrary to the East Riding local plan, contrary to policy S4, in that it doesn't support development in villages and the countryside, and in relation to the harm to the character of the conservation area. All those in favour of this motion, please raise your hand. All those against the motion to refuse. So 4 voted in favour of that motion, 5 voted against, so that is lost.
Now we move to the other.
And we can now take a vote on the motion to approve this. So that is to go with the officer recommendation, which was to defer this application to get agreement on the section 106 agreement and then for the application to be approved. And that was proposed by Cllr Lee and seconded by Cllr Steele. All those in favour of approval, please can you raise your hand? And all those against? So that's 5 in favour of that, 4 against. So that is carried, and that is it's approved to defer this for the section 106 agreement to approve the application.
Thank you. Right. Next item. Thank you. So item 6 now, which is on page 84. This is change of use of land, the storing of repairing of wooden pallets, and this is on the industrial estate, Wellington Way, Carnaby. Do we have any updates on this one?
No updates, Chair, just by way of introduction. The site's located on Carnaby Industrial Estate, and the proposed use of land is for the change of use for the storing and repairing of wooden pallets, siting of a storage container for ancillary purposes, erection of a 2.1 metre high palisade fence and gates with associated work. The site forms part of the allocation for within the industrial estate, and it's for a use that is compatible with the industrial estate. The only reason the application has been brought to the committee is because the site is currently within the ownership of the council, although the applicant isn't the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Councillor Scow.
Thank you, Chair. Don't see a problem with this, just to move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with Councillor Scow. I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Norman. Right, we have a move for officer's recommendation.
That's right, to been proposed by Councillor Scow and seconded by Councillor Lee to approve this application as per the officer recommendation. All those in favour, please can you raise your hand? And that's 9, and that's unanimous, carried, approved.
That application is approved. Thank you. And that concludes our items on the agenda for today, but if members could remain behind for a moment, please.
I think we have another item, Chair,
Do
the
we?
appeals.
Oh, apologies. Terribly sorry, I'm trying to race ahead here. We do have some appeal decisions. Over to Anna.
Just one appeal decision, which is land adjacent to 29 Jewison Lane, Sewerby in Bridlington. It was an application for a single dwelling, which was outside the development limit. And it was refused, and the appeal was allowed. The inspector found that overall, even though the appeal site would be located outside the development limit, it is in a reasonably accessible location of this, located close to services and facilities and within walking distance. And it demonstrated a lack of encroachment into the countryside, and they felt it was an appropriate scale and didn't cause any harm to the intrinsic character of the site surroundings. So in this instance, the inspector found that those considerations outweighed the fact that it was outside the development limit, and it wouldn't significantly undermine the aims of the spatial strategy as a whole. And so the appeal was allowed with various conditions. So that is quite an interesting one, really. We don't often have that, but yeah, it was allowed in this case.
Was that totally outside the development limits?
Yeah, it was, but it's very close to built development within Bridlington, and isn't in a wholly rural location. But yes, it is completely outside the development limit.
Interesting. Thank you, Anna. So, and we have now finished all our items on the agenda, so we can close the meeting. Thank you.